The San Francisco 49ers finished the 2024 season with a 6-11 record and missed the playoffs for the first time since 2020.
Fourth down, 49ers jump, but they get back on side. Murray and throwing it up for Harris. Oh, he's got it for a first down!
And unfortunately, the 2024 season for the 49ers felt very similar to the 2020 season.
So the question is, are they banged up or are they actually bad?
They were coming off of a Super Bowl loss, and there were countless injuries the following year, and in a lot of ways, 2024, just like 2020, is a year best forgotten for the 49ers. And while San Francisco has not won a Super Bowl in this era, they have been one of the most successful franchises in the entire NFL over the past 6 years. They are one of just 2 teams to go to at least 4 conference championship games in the past 6 years, the other, of course, being the Kansas City Chiefs. And with all of the success the 49ers have had over the past several years, obviously that means they had to have some pretty talented rosters. And at the end of the day, the NFL is a business. And the 2025 49ers are going to look a lot different than the 2024 49ers.
Felt like they had their window that just got away from them. And it feels like they're just kind of saying, all right, we need to pivot.
They cut or traded several players this offseason in what were business decisions in hopes of building a better tomorrow. And while I don't think the 49ers are going to be a bad team this year by any stretch of the imagination, the new look San Francisco 49ers are here. And in today's video, we're going to break down the 2025 49ers. We're going to break down what their strengths are, what their weaknesses are, what went wrong in 2024, and a whole lot more. And without further ado, let's begin. And we are starting today's video by discussing who the 49ers brought in this offseason and who is no longer on the roster. The 49ers made 3 trades this offseason as they traded receiver Deebo Samuel to the Washington Commanders for a 5th-round pick that was eventually used on running back Jordan James. They also traded running back Jordan Mason to the Vikings in exchange for a 27-pick swap in the 5th round of the 2025 draft, with the 49ers moving up in the draft, of course, and a 2026 6th. And a month after the draft in June, they traded for Bryce Huff, a pass rusher from the Eagles, who was a very disappointing free agency signing for the Birds, despite having a great 2023 season with the Jets. I know there's times where people are surprised by trade value and that Deebo Samuel only netted a 5th-round pick, but Deebo is a unique player, and given that he is 29 years old coming off of a not great year, I wasn't surprised the 49ers only received a 5th-round pick for him. The wear and tear on his body is different than other receivers, and I've thought for a few years that when Deebo starts to decline, it's going to be pretty fast because of the toll on his body. Now, admittedly, I was very surprised they traded Jordan Mason to the Vikings, at least for what they traded him for, but their leading rusher from 2024 is no longer on the roster. And we'll discuss Bryce Huff more during the defensive portion of the video, but I really like this trade for San Francisco and think this trade has some of the highest potential return from any trade this offseason. Now, whenever you have a team like the 49ers, you know a team with the Trent Williams, Nick Bosa's, Fred Warner's, George Kittle's, and those players of the world, even Brandon Ayuk, who signed a 4-year, $120 million contract last offseason, inevitably you're going to have a reset year at some point. And we saw Buffalo go through this after they got rid of players like Jordan Poyer, Micah Hyde, Stephon Diggs, Gabe Davis, and Mitch Morse last offseason, and the point is, this is what the 49ers had to go through this offseason. Aaron Banks is now a Packer, and I'll be honest, I was extremely surprised with the contract Green Bay gave him, as it was a 4-year, $77 million deal, but the point is, that's a position San Francisco had to fill this offseason. They also lost Charvarius Ward, who signed with the Colts, as well as Dre Greenlaw and Talanoa Hufanga, both of which went to the Broncos in free agency. And because of Brock Purdy being on the rookie scale contract over the past few years, they were able to sign big players in free agency and make moves that you wouldn't think would have been possible. Defensive tackle Javon Hargrave was a big one, no pun intended, as he signed a 4-year, $84 million deal with the 49ers 2 years ago, before being released this offseason and before signing with the Vikings in free agency. They also lost Leonard Floyd and Malik Collins, 2 players along the front 4 who are not irreplaceable by any means, but whose snaps will need to be replaced in 2025. And typically when you go all the way in the way the 49ers have over the past few years, you do this knowing there's eventually going to be a year with a very large dead cap hit. and the 49ers have the highest dead cap hit of any team in the NFL this year at over $93 million. But the reality is, if you win a championship, it does not matter. There is no owner that wouldn't pay this in exchange for a guaranteed Super Bowl, and inevitably that's going to limit what you're going to be able to do in free agency, and as you can imagine, the 49ers were not big spenders this year. The biggest contracts they gave out were to Luke Farrell, Mac Jones, and Demarcus Robinson, and largely due to all of those guys in front of them on the depth chart, I don't think any of these players are going to have a big impact for the 49ers this year. Robinson may spot start here and there, but all three of these were more depth signings than anything, and obviously not meant to be disrespectful towards each individual player. That's just kind of how the NFL works. Now, for the 49ers defense, this is a unit I'll be excited to watch over the course of the 2025 season, and one of the biggest reasons for that is because of how much they emphasized the run defense in the draft, combined with how bad they were against the run last year. The 49ers were 23rd in defensive rushing DVOA in 2024 and 29th in defensive EPA rushing, and were also 30th in rushing touchdowns allowed. Their first 5 selections in the 2025 draft were all defense, and the first 2 were a good run defending edge in Micah Williams from Georgia and a mammoth of a man from Texas in Alfred Collins. I am also really looking forward to seeing Robert Saleh be the team's defensive coordinator again, and I do think he is the definition of a guy who is a better coordinator than head coach. And not only am I excited for Robert Saleh to be back with the 49ers, but this team has 3 division games in the first 5 games of the year in 2025. And the 49ers are the last team preview for the NFC West, so if you haven't watched the other team previews, I recommend starting with the Seahawks. Well, this division loves to run the football, and funnily enough, the core principle of stopping the run on first and second down to get you in 3rd and 8 so the pass rushers in this division, like Jarrett Verse or Josh Sweat, or of course a former DPOY in Nick Bosa, can get after the quarterback is in a lot of ways the game plan for all 4 of these teams. And the 49ers couldn't get to that point last year, at least consistently. And that's going to be the biggest thing with the 49ers, is can they get to 3rd and 7 to the point where we can have Nick Bosa and Bryce Huff, who I do believe will be back this year, get after the quarterback. And when you think of the 25 49ers, you may think of a team that's had a lot of roster turnover or a team that's going through a transition phase, but I think the secondary can be one of the better units in the league. I think Deommodore Lenoir is a fine corner, and I really like Renardo Green, and he had a good rookie year last year, and he's a player that I think takes a step this year. My biggest question with the 49ers is the linebacking unit, outside of one player, of course. Fred Warner is now a 4-time first-team All-Pro, and I don't think it can be emphasized enough just how much he impacts the game. The 49ers lost this game 23-17 last year, but in the Vikings game alone, he intercepted a pass in the red zone and forced a fumble as Aaron Jones was about to score, meaning Fred took at least 10 points off the board alone, assuming Minnesota would have had a field goal on the other drive he intercepted a pass within the red zone. He's a Hall of Fame talent, and my biggest question for this defense is, can the rest of the linebacking core step up? Can the rest of the defensive line step up? Can Robert Saleh maximize everyone's talent on this defense to the point where San Francisco is a top 12 or 13 unit? Ultimately, I think this team will have a higher floor this year, but if the X factors of this defense or the unknowns step up, then they can get back to the NFC Championship game for the 5th time in 7 years. I do think the 49ers will have 2 players with 40-plus pressures this year in Nick Bosa and Bryce Huff, and think they will be one of the better duos in the league. However, one thing that I think will hold this defense up, or at least limit this defense, is interior pressure. We know Nick Bosa is going to be good, but he can't do everything. And one big thing about the 49ers that has to be remembered entering 2025 is they should be better than last year, but they are in a lot of ways a work in progress from an interior pressure standpoint. I love the young secondary with guys like Renardo Green and especially Malik Mustafa, but really worry about the depth of the linebacking core as well as the interior defensive line. If they can overcome those concerns, or at least minimize those concerns, then this should be one of the better defenses in the NFL this year. The 2025 49ers draft class was a class I was not a big fan of during draft weekend, but now that we've had a couple of months to really marinate and sit and think about each individual draft class, this is a class that I've grown to like more over the past couple of months, and I really credit Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch for having the vision they had entering the 2025 draft and sticking to their board and executing what the vision was to begin with, which was to stop the run. As we mentioned during the defensive portion of the video, this team could not consistently stop the run last year, and when you you are in a division with the Seahawks, Rams, and Cardinals, teams that all love to run the football, you have to be able to stop the run before you can even think about playing other teams in the conference, whether it's the Lions, the Eagles, the Commanders, whoever. You have to be able to get out of the NFC West first. So they drafted a developmental edge in Mykal Williams in the first round, a player who is good at stopping the run. Now, we'll discuss Mykal's upside or pass rush upside in a minute, but right now, if Mykal can come in and set a hard edge and basically play next to Alfred Collins and be able to have the linebackers behind him and Fred Warner and third round pick Nick Martin be able to shoot the gaps and come in and stop the run and do a better job of getting San Francisco defensively to these 3rd and 7 and 3rd and 8 situations to where we can have Nick Bosa, Bryce Huff, and Mykal Williams get after the quarterback, then they have more than done their job, because like we mentioned, that was not something San Francisco could do at a consistent level last year. Now, I do think San Francisco did overdraft Mykal Williams a little bit, but again, if he comes in and helps stops the run, then it really doesn't matter, because they are putting themselves in a better position to succeed by allowing Nick Bosa to pin his ears back and get after the quarterback on 3rd down. And situationally, that is setting your guys up for success, and the same concept applies to 2nd round pick Alfred Collins. I really liked Alfred Collins as a run-stuffing defensive tackle, and the biggest thing that we have to remember with Alfred Collins here is if you are looking for a player that's going to have 64 combined tackles and 6.5 sacks as a defensive tackle, then that is not the guy you are looking for. There's going to be years where Alfred Collins has 24 combined tackles and 1.5 sacks and maybe 5 quarterback hits, but as long as he can do his job on 1st and 2nd down and help the defense get into those situations, then we are looking at the 49ers defense being able to maximize what they can do under a Robert Saleh defense, which is to be able to get in those 3rd and longs and to be able to pin their ears and get after the quarterback. Now, I think there is a conversation worth having of whether or not the 49ers should have taken a run-stuffing edge at number 11 overall, because Mykal Williams' floor right now is not all that high, and there are floor-raising players, and I don't think Mykal Williams is a floor-raising pass rusher. I think he's a floor-raising run-stuffer, which in some cases is good, but is that really worth the number 11 overall pick in the long run? That's certainly a question worth asking, but he's in a good situation, and if he reaches anywhere close to his potential, then we're going to have a legitimate Robin to Nick Bosa's Batman. Now, with Nick Martin, the 3rd round linebacker, this was a player I did not have in my top 150. I think there's a lot of questions surrounding his game. Unfortunately, he missed a lot of 2024 due to a knee injury, but Nick Martin is a player, if he's used in the right way, which I do believe Robert Saleh will use him in the right way, he can be a fun player and a guy that's going to come in and shoot gaps the right way in the run game, and a player that can really get after the quarterback in hyper-specific roles on 3rd down. If you want to send a blitz on 3rd down, Nick Martin is going to be a linebacker to get after your guy. That way you can keep Fred Warner in the back of the defense and let him do best, which is cover on 3rd down. So whenever you think about what the 49ers game plan is going to be defensively, again, the more that we sit back and marinate and think about this class, I can get behind the selections of Mykal Williams, Alfred Collins, and Nick Martin, given the man that's going to be in charge of the defense, which of course is Robert Saleh. The biggest thing that I want remembered for the 2025 49ers rookie impact is I think this class will be a floor-raising class in the long run, especially with Mykal Williams and Alfred Collins, but Mykal Williams specifically is just 21 years old. There's a reality where he comes into the NFL as a 21-year-old rookie and gets pushed around quite a bit, going up against collegiate players to 27 or 28 or 30-year-old grown men every single Sunday. No disrespect is intended to the SEC, of course, but there's a difference between playing collegiate offensive linemen and going up against guys like Lane Johnson and Penei Sewell on Sundays over the course of a 17-game season. So I think in 2026 and 2027, you'll really see Mykal Williams start to blossom, and the same also applies to Alfred Collins, and ultimately with the 100th overall pick in corner Upton Stout. Upton Stout is a 5'8.5", 180-pound corner, and he's going to become a fan favorite if he produces to the level that I think he will, because he's going to be a very physical, in-your-face, tone-setting corner, and typically, I know from experience, fans absolutely love those players. He reminds me a lot of Antoine Winfield Sr., that is. His junior, of course, is on the Bucs, but he reminds me of Antoine Winfield Sr., who was very much the same way when he played with Buffalo and Minnesota in the early to mid-2000s. My biggest concern with Upton Stout as he enters the NFL is going to be the size and physical limitations, as he's 5'8.5", 180 pounds with 30-inch arms, and I really worry about somebody like Puka Nacua, who's 6'1", 6'2", weighs 30 more pounds than him, lining up against him in the slot, and Sean McVay exploiting that routinely, and not just Puka Nacua, but several other receivers for that matter too, and that's going to be a transition period for Upton Stout. But what I want to be remembered with the 2025 49ers draft class, and ultimately the 2025 49ers season, is for everybody they lost this offseason, Deebo Samuel, Charvarius Ward, Jordan Mason, Talanoa Hufanga, Dre Greenlaw, everybody that they lost, this is going to be a transition year. So while I do think the 2025 draft class for the 49ers has a pretty low floor, at least for what their rookie production level will be, I think that the ceiling is considerably high in 2026 and beyond. So I don't want this to be that every player they drafted is going to be a bust. I just don't think there's going to be a whole lot of rookie production in 2025 pertaining to where each player was drafted, but that doesn't mean I don't like what they represent in the long run, because I absolutely do. I just wouldn't have the highest expectations for the 2025 49ers draft class for this year specifically. For the 2025 49ers offense, I'll be honest, this is a unit I'm really high on entering the year, with one big stipulation, and that of course is health. And health and turnovers did not go the 49ers' way in 2024, and the reality is, if Christian McCaffrey, Brandon Ayuk, and Trent Williams all go down with season-ending injuries or miss double-digit games in 2025, then the 49ers season is effectively over. Unfortunately, the 49ers 2024 season is probably best remembered for a 5-game span, in which started with a home loss to Seattle. That started a spiral which was not good, and the 49ers were at a pivotal point in that Seattle game, as they entered that Seattle game coming off of a win against the Bucs, in which they were 5-4. Obviously, you can do the math. If they win the Seattle game, they're 6-4, and they're in the driver's seat, despite everything that happened to them up to that point. They lose the Seattle game in a tough loss near the end of the game. They get blown out by Green Bay. They get blown out by Buffalo in front of everyone to see, as it was a Sunday night game. Then, credit to them, they absolutely beat the brakes off the Bears, in which George Kittle had over 150 receiving yards in the first half. But after that Bears game was the infamous Thursday night rain game against the Rams, in which the 49ers lost 12-6. And after that game, they were 6-8, and their season was effectively over. Now, one big difference between 2023 and 2024 for the 49ers, aside from health, of course, was turnovers. They only turned the ball over 18 times in 23 versus 27 in 24, and there was also a pretty substantial difference just in terms of game flow and the breaks the 49ers would receive throughout games. And one game that I point to from 2024 in particular, as cliche and as simple as this idea is, was the Week 5 loss to the Cardinals, in which San Francisco lost 24-23. San Francisco entered the half up 23-10, and you would think that, hey, if we get a field goal, we'll be up 26-10. That's 2 touchdowns plus 2-point conversions, and we'll be in the driver's seat. Chances are we're not going to lose this game, and especially if we get a touchdown, and at that point we'd be up 3 scores in the second half, and we really shouldn't have anything to worry about. But San Francisco had 4 second half possessions in that game, and I think these 4 possessions they had within that game really summarize just how the 2024 49ers season went, again, aside from injury. The first possession was a great defensive play. San Francisco was up 23-10. Brock Purdy throws an interception off a batted ball from a defensive lineman. Brock Purdy did not go up to the defensive lineman before the play and say, hey, Roy Lopez, I'm just going to try to throw this one over your head, buddy, so if you could just let me do that, I'd really appreciate it, and just try to throw it like a beer pong ball. Just throw it over his head. That's not how it worked. Roy Lopez made a great play, and it was an interception, and Arizona now had the ball in San Francisco territory, and then they got a field goal out of it to make it 23-13. On the very next possession, San Francisco had the ball down at the Arizona 27-yard line and eventually found themselves in a 4th and 23 situation. Jake Moody was not a great kicker for the 49ers last year, and that's putting it mildly. So instead of to try to kick it to make it a 26-13 game, and I really don't think that that would make that much of a difference, because if you are going for the win as Jonathan Gannon, the coach of the Cardinals, you're probably going to try to win in regulation rather than force overtime. So even if they kicked the field goal and made it 26-13, I still think Arizona would have tried to have scored 2 touchdowns rather than a touchdown and field goal to begin with, or again, maybe go for 2, which they eventually did. But the point is, it's now 23-13, 4th and 23 from the opposing 27-yard line. They don't get it. Arizona now has the ball on their own 27-yard line. They go down, get a touchdown, and get the 2-point conversion, and it's now a 23-21 game. San Francisco's third possession of the second half gets them all the way down inside the Cardinals' 10-yard line, in which Jordan Mason fumbles the football and Arizona recovers, instead of it being a 30-21 game with what would have been a touchdown to make it a 2-score game and to effectively put the game on ice. Arizona now has the football down 2 points, and they go down and kick a field goal to make it 24-23. San Francisco now has the ball back with less than 2 minutes to play, and you guessed it, Brock Purdy throws an interception after getting drilled on his blind side, and the ball went way up in the air, and that was it. Game, set, match. Cardinals overcome a 13-point second half deficit and win 24-23. And the reason we bring that up for the 2025 49ers preview is I don't think that's going to happen at the rate that it did last year. Things did not go the 49ers way in 2024, and I don't think that's going to happen in back-to-back years, especially the way that it did last year. Not just from an injury standpoint, but from a game flow standpoint too. Now, I don't want this to sound like it was a complete testament of bad luck and that the 49ers are going to face zero adversity in 2025, because that's certainly not going to be the case. But I don't think they're going to have to go through the level of adversity that they did in 2024, both unfortunately on and off the field. And despite everything that happened to the 49ers last year, would you be surprised to know they still finished 9th in offensive DVOA and 9th in EPA per play? And I know people love giving their opinions on Brock Purdy. I personally think he's underrated, and I think he is a really, really good quarterback, and the 49ers still finished 7th in passing DVOA last year. And my biggest question entering 2025 for the 49ers, aside from health, because you have to at least assume it's going to go a little better in their favor. I'm not going to predict a week 5 injury or week 14 injury or whatever the case, but did Brock Purdy forget how to play quarterback? Is Kyle Shanahan still not one of the best coaches in the NFL? Did he all of a sudden forget the 40 years of football wisdom that he has? No, they're still going to be a really good, fundamentally sound team, a really well-coached team, and that also applies to the defensive side of the football and what should improve too. So if you have a unit last year that struggled the way the 49ers did to be able to stay healthy, and you're going to have years like that, as unfortunate as that sounds, still finish top 10 in DVOA and EPA per play, along with a defense that should naturally get better, am I missing something? Why would I not buy in with the 49ers? And reasonably, that is. I'm not going to say Super Bowl champions, but why would I not think that this team can't get back to the postseason after a considerably down year last year in which things flat out did not go their way? And that's going to be the reason as to why I think the 49ers floor in 2025 is going to be around 9 wins, despite all of the roster turnover they had from last year to this year. For a stat projection for the 2025 49ers offense, I do think Brock Purdy will be around 4,000 to 4,200 passing yards, along with 27 to 29 passing touchdowns. With Christian McCaffrey, you unfortunately have to mention health, but if he is healthy, I don't think it's unreasonable for him to have a 15 to 1,700 total yard season, along with 12 to 14 total touchdowns. I don't think he's going to have a 2,000 total yard season and 21 total touchdown year, the way that he did in 2023, and it is also worth mentioning that CMC is now 29 years old. The receivers are a really difficult one to project because all three are going to get the football, and there's going to be weeks where Brandon Ayuk, if healthy, has 120 yards and a touchdown, and within that same game, Christian McCaffrey could have 125 total yards and a touchdown, and George Kittle may have 85 yards, and Ricky Pearsall has 2 catches for 14 yards. Collectively, they will obviously be a really good trio, again, barring health, and I'm not going to predict that Brandon Ayuk is going to have 64 receptions for 1,144 yards and 6 touchdowns, and you get the point. If they are all healthy, they will be one of the better trios in all of football, and that is what's going to matter most for the 2025 49ers. Admittedly, I am a really big fan of George Kittle. Shout out TEU. It'd be really cool to see him get his 5th 1,000-yard season and to continue to build on what is already a Hall of Fame career, but I think at minimum he's going to be a 750 to 800-yard tight end, along with 5 to 7 receiving touchdowns. If this team stays healthy, they should undoubtedly be a top 10 offense in 2025, and what also benefits the 49ers this year is they play both the NFC South and AFC South. We've went over it before on the channel, but obviously playing the Falcons, Panthers, and Saints is a hell of a lot more beneficial than having to play the Lions, Packers, and Vikings, and the same thing also applies when you get to play the Colts, Jags, and Titans versus teams like the Chiefs, Chargers, and Broncos over the course of a 17-game season. It also really benefits the 49ers that they have a Week 14 bye, and I'll be honest, I think this team's ceiling this year is an NFC Championship game appearance. I hope you enjoyed, and if you did, please like the video and subscribe as we are closing in on 200,000 subscribers, and I cannot thank you guys enough for the support. Until next time, please be safe and have a great day. Love you guys.